Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions is a non-violent grassroots movement that emerged in 2005 as a response to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. BDS movement seeks to exert economic and political pressure on the state of Israel as well as entities and corporations associated with Israeli policies in the occupied Palestinian territories. Its primary goal are to advocate for justice, equality, and the realization of Palestinian rights, includes the right to self-determination and the rights of return for Palestinian refugees. In this webinar, we aim to delve deeper into the origin, strategies, challenges, and impacts of BDS movement, as well as India's role in the support of Palestinian movement. We have assembled a panel of experts who will share their insights and engage in thoughtful discussion on the complex and controversial topic. Our goal is to foster greater understanding of the BDS movement, its role in international relations, and the broader context of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We hope this webinar will serve as a platform for open dialogue and constructive discourses, enabling us to explore the diverse perspectives surrounding BDS and its implication. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to productive and enlightening discussions. Before I ask other our esteemed guests, I would like to ask our student, our research scholar, Mr. Sadiq, to have to recite the Quranic verse, and then we will begin our today's program. Mr. Sadiq.
Yeah, thank you, MP, as well. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في صدق الله العظيم. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Mr. Sadiq. And now I like to introduce our esteemed guest, Professor Patel. Uh, before I come to her first, what she is currently holding the position. She is currently adjunct professor in international relations at the newly constituted Malawi School of Government. She is also the co-founder and chairperson of the Institute for Policy Interaction, a governance think tank established in 2001. Before moving to Malawi, she has worked with European Union and also United Nations. And before joining to United Nations, she was a lecturer at a college in Bombay University, and then she moved. Later on, she moved as an intern to. Then she served as a United Nations volunteer electoral observer under the United Nations Developer Program of assistance to the general election of Malawi from 94 to 30th March 94 to the 20th of 9 July 1994. Later on, she was one of the founder of and she established the Department of Political Science in Malawi. She has particularly worked on African and particularly Malawian politics and elections over the period of time. She has been the this board member of Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, which is known as ISA, from 2011 to 2019, and she has also served as Special Law Commissioner and Electoral Reforms Commissioner from 2016 to 17. Um, uh, she is currently working on the projects with European Union and also on with some electoral and democracy institutions. We are really delighted to have with us the Professor Patel, who has excellent knowledge of the elections and as well as she has developed the interest on the Palestinian during her, we could say, college days and her research days when she was doing PhD. From those days, she has worked with the NGOs as well as other uh, forums for the Palestinian issue. And over the period of time, she has developed interest on the Palestinian issue, where she has worked with the Palestinian Forum in Malawi as well. She is also very much spoken, very well spoken, and also the patron of Gandhian philosophy in Africa. Uh, uh, I would like to before we ask Professor Patel to enlighten us with her experience, life experiences, and her knowledge. I would like our keynotes, our speaker, Professor Jawaid Iqbal sir, to have a word on the
opening remark.
topic, and then
Opening remark. Opening remark.
opening for
Thank
the
you.
opening remarks. For the opening
Uh,
remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Imtiaz. I welcome Professor Nandini to our center's occasional lecture series, Global Movement for Palestinian Rights about BDS. West Asian Studies AMU has a long history of engaging with scholars from different parts of the world, particularly from West Asia and parts of Africa. The BDS movement, as we all know, has been an ongoing movement from the side of the Palestinians against the Israeli apartheid regime that has been put in place in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. BDS movement in India, it may not be very popular, but in parts of Africa it's very popular. Particularly, I know in Southern Africa, South Africa in particular, they are very actively involved in the BDS movement and in promoting the Palestinian cause. Apart from the BDS movement, the Palestinians are also engaged in an electronic intifada, which the Israeli regime has been opposing tooth and nail. The different fora which are available to the hapless Palestinians have been used by the PLO leadership as well as other factions within the Palestine Liberation Organization to promote the cause of Palestine at the international level. During the last few years, we have seen, particularly after the end of the Soviet Union, collapse of the Soviet Union, we have seen that the Palestinian cause has been pushed in the back burner, and not many countries are taking a very active interest in the Palestine cause. In fact, we see just the opposite taking place right now in the Arab world itself, where the countries are now one after another are engaging Israel and are willing to establish diplomatic relations with the Zionist state. So, in face of such a formidable enemy, the Palestinian leadership has to resort to different types of
Attendance found only.
struggle in order to keep the Palestinian cause in the forefront of the international community, so that the international community does not forget about the Palestinians. And this is a country which is still awaiting liberation from the colonial oppressors, and this is the last vestige of settler colonialism,
Attendance form कर रहा हूँ.
which still exists in a very virulent and violent form in the West Asian region. With these few words, I now welcome Dr. Nandini Patel to deliver her lecture.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes.
Should I start?
Yes, please, Professor, please.
Okay. Good afternoon to each one of you. The Dean of the Faculty of International Studies of Aligarh Muslim University, the convener, Professor Jawaid Iqbal, and all faculty members and students who have joined this morning. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be speaking to staff and students of one of the oldest distinguished institution of higher learning in India, that is the Aligarh Muslim University. It was always my desire to visit that university and see the magnificent structure and interact with academics. And the time has come now for interaction. And I hope that very soon I'll get a chance to visit your university. Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's a huge opportunity for me, and I don't take it for granted. Um, I thank the moderator, Mr. Imtiaz Ahmed, for setting the tone of the seminar today, giving a very, very clear background, and for that grand introduction. In fact, some of the things he mentioned I had forgotten, so he refreshed my memory. Uh, yes, I must say I was very lucky and blessed to have some of the experiences I had in war zones as well as in fairly stable political environment. Also, Professor Jawaid Iqbal's background and his insights into BDS movement is very, very accurate. And I will share some of my own observations and mostly experiences on this issue. I must confess, and you might have also heard from the introduction, that I have not worked in the region, in the MENA region. I have also not done really academic work on this issue, but I have been involved with this issue, as Mr. Ahmed mentioned. When I was a student at the University of Bombay, as it was called those days, during my masters and especially during my PhD days, that is in the early 90s, there used to be a group of Palestinian students, and they had an organization called GUPS, General Union of Palestinian Students, and they had campuses. They had the groups unions wherever the students were there, and they were there in a number of university campuses in India at that time. And in the city of Pune, that's at the outskirts of Bombay, there's a very large group of 700 Palestinian students. And they would organize activities. And with my own ideological background of a bit of left leaning, being actively involved with Bombay Labor Union and so on, I was very naturally inclined to support the cause in whatever small way I could. So that was my initial introduction to the Palestinian issue and the cause. And of course, as a student of international relations, we were also studying the background and going way back to the Balfour Declaration and then the processes thereafter. And this period I'm talking about also coincided with the first Intifada that started in 1987, going up to 1991 to 93. So we would get very, very interesting information from what's going on in Palestine from these students' organizations, groups. And as was mentioned in my introduction, after that, my life's journey changed. It took a different route. Little did I know that time that Africa will become my home, and I live in a country called Malawi. So I was more involved in the democratization process, the third wave democracy, as it is called, in the early 90s. And I first came to Malawi as one of the international observers, but it was a long-term mission those days, not like election observation today, which also has long-term observation, but the technique is quite different now. There is a method that's done. Those days it was more of interacting with various stakeholders and so on. So that was my first experience in Africa, and it was very, very enlightening to see how the democratic transition comes. And since then, both my academic work and my activism has been around African democracy. But recently, I got reconnected, say last 3 years, with the Palestinian issue when Malawi's government took a very strange stand on this issue, about which I'll come to later in my presentation to say the BDS movement in Africa, adding on to what Prof. Iqbal has said, and also what is particularly happening in Malawi. Now, my presentation is basically, I'll start with the construction of this wall um, and the legality of the wall. What has the International Court of Justice said on the wall? And then I will briefly talk about the impact of the war on the lives of the Palestinian people. And then coming to the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and also the legality. Interestingly, in some countries, particularly in United States and Western Europe, they raise the issue of legality of sanctions. So I'll touch on that and come to this point on India and Israel relations today and India-Israel relations then, that is during the time of non-aligned movement, and India's solidarity and support to the Palestinian movement during the times of non-aligned movement, and how things have changed completely in the opposite direction today. And then a bit about the Malawian case, and very, very briefly of what I think of the future. So that is, in a nutshell, the gist of my presentation. So, of course, I'm sure you all have seen the wall that is I've shown on the slide, how the wall looks like. Um, so, since 2002, as you know, Israel has been constructing this wall. Now, one of my favorite scholars on Palestinian issue is Professor Noam Chomsky, the Jewish American. He has been writing for decades, very vocal, very, very open on this issue. And I start with what Noam Chomsky had to say. And he says, yes, one would not really question that Israel has a right to protect its citizens from terrorist attacks and even build a security wall if that is really the appropriate means. It's also clear where such a wall would be built if security were the principal concern, that is, within the internationally recognized border, the Green Line that was established after 1948-49. And then in his article, which appeared on the New York Times, 2004, July 24th, I think, he says that this was before the International Court of Justice judgment. His article, a few months came before that, and the court judgment came later. So here he quotes a number of observations from uh, uh, scholars from and also the legal positions from various countries. But he's very interestingly mentioning a British Parliamentary Investigative Commission, uh, which also called for a wall to be built on Israeli land, condemning the barrier as a part of deliberate Israeli strategy of bringing the population to heel. So there are also very strong voices in Britain and United States and elsewhere to say building of a wall, if necessary for security of of your people, is fine, but it should be in the Israeli land and in the Green Line and not on the Palestinian side. So I think that is the critical issue where the wall has been built and the horrendous implications that is having on the lives of the Palestinian people. In fact, in the article, Chomsky mentions that the UN, even before the wall construction began, had said that this would create 50 disconnected Palestinian pockets in the West Bank. So and the slide I've called the title "The Wall of Politicide." What is politicide? It is political cleansing. You're literally creating ghettos, ghettoization of Palestinian towns and villages, which cuts off thousands of Palestinians from social services, schools, and farmland. And this, of course, resonates very well with the South African situation, because the South Africans have gone through living under apartheid regime, living in ghettos, and what that means. And recently, Madiba Nelson Mandela's grandson spoke extremely passionately and convincingly when he was speaking to the BDS movement group in South Africa, referring to how well they empathized with the Palestinian people and made a very passionate call for solidarity with with the people of Palestine and through the BDS movement. So, coming to the ruling of the International Court of Justice, as we know, on 8 July 2004, the court ruled that the construction of the wall being built by Israel, the occupying power, in the occupied Palestinian territory, including in and around East Jerusalem and its associated regime, are contrary to international law. And and this was like 14-1. 14 of the panel were against and one in support, of course, the of United States. I think it was Thomas Bergenthal, the judge, but all others were agreeing that the construction of the wall was illegal. But again, Chomsky at that time said that even before the court ruling a few months before, that the Hague hearing will end in the advisory ruling that the wall is illegal. Still, it will change nothing. Any real chance for a political settlement and for decent lives of the people of the region depends on the United States. So his contention was even all the 15 can say this is illegal, but still, if the United States want it that way, nothing is going to change. And I think that's what we are seeing, unfortunately. Now, after the 2004 ICJ ruling, what has really picked up, in fact, what has really picked up since the early 2000s, after saying that none of the peace settlements have really brought any change, the Palestinian civil society organizations called for BDS, boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, as a form of non-violent pressure on Israel, mainly as a civil society movement adopting these techniques. So it was launched by 170 Palestinian civil society organizations, trade unions, political parties, refugee networks, women's organizations, professional associations, popular resistance committees, and other Palestinian civil society bodies. They are inspired, as I said earlier, by the South African anti-apartheid movement. And although broad, it is coordinated in large part by the Palestinian BDS National Committee based in the Palestine territories. Of course, you would know which are the main Israeli companies that are being targeted. It's also on the screen in the slide, which shows Puma and TripAdvisors and some of that. So for us to join the solidarity movement, I think even if the students decide not to wear Puma shoes or not to use TripAdvisor, that will be supporting the movement in a considerable way. And I do understand that there are very, very strong students' union groups in Indian universities, and a number of them have endorsed the BDS. Now, of course, there has been a response from various organizations from different parts of the world, including the city councils and activist groups like in the United States, Canada, India, South Africa, Israel, UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, and as was mentioned, the number of countries joining in from the African continent is also increasing, and the movement is slowly building up, as I'll mention a little bit more later in my presentation. I was interacting with one of the BNC, the National Committee, Boycott National Committee members, who is Italian, Dr. Mantovani, who also made a visit. Sorry, there's some. Can you hear me? Mr. Ahmed, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you. There was a bit interruption.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Um, so I'm saying that so it's a variety of organizations, civil society groups, but also churches, city councils, and others, because the divestment works for some of the organization, whereas sanctions works for others. So there's a collective, and I was mentioning about the visit of Dr. Mantovani to Malawi, a member of the BNC, and she was saying that the largest BDS operation, institutionally very well set up and active, is in the United States. And we can imagine that given the opportunity and the space for raising this concern, that the BDS is well established in some of the West European countries, much as the governments have a very different position. And this brings me to the issue of because apart from intense lobbying and propaganda campaigns, there was also an attempt to suppress the BDS to include a transnational strategy to censor it by means of an instrumentalization of the law. An attempt was made to use the law to say it's illegal, that the sanctions can be imposed by governments, by states, by regimes, and not by civil society organizations. And there is actually a very interesting long legal debate on that. In the United States, more than 100, in fact, number of these countries in West Europe have already started this to sort of put restrictions on local, state, and federal legislatures since 2004. In the United States, more than 100 measures targeting boycotts and Palestinian rights activisms have been introduced since 2014. And 27 states have adopted anti-BDS laws, including 5 executive orders issued by state governments. Also in France and control the BDS movement. On the call of Israeli Minister Katz to engage in targeted civilian elimination of BDS leaders, that EU stands firmly in protecting freedom of expression and freedom of association in line with the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, which is applicable on EU member states' territory, including with regard to BDS actions carried out in his own country. So this was a success, that the EU Commission came out very clearly against any legal restrictions, that it is very much a matter of human rights. And there is also examples I mentioned in the slide about Texas, where they said that it's a form of political expression on the highest rung of the hierarchy of First Amendment values. So it is in line with what the American Constitution provides. So the BDS have had challenges that countries have tried to enact laws to restrict the BDS activities, but these have been successfully faced by eminent lawyers in a number of countries, that it's very well documented and several activities returned. So coming to India and Palestine, the reason is, yes, it is because I'm an Indian and I'm speaking to an Indian audience, but also because of the connection during from the early years, as I mentioned earlier, what Gandhi thought of, the leader of our national movement, father of our nation, thought of Palestine and the right of Palestine for their homeland, and also how the non-alignment, Professor Iqbal said that after the end of Cold War, of course, the whole scenario has changed and things have started moving in a different direction. For Gandhi, the Palestinian issue was a question of justice and compassion. His most formidable position on Palestine was, it's a very famous quote of Gandhi, that Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France to French. It's wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on the Arabs. And then after independence, it continued, as you know, that India role under the leadership of our first prime minister in taking the Palestinian cause at that level. However, you also know that India had relations with Israel even during those years, particularly in terms of supply of military equipment. Even at that time, as I said, the military relations were quite strong. And from there are a lot of statistics available to say, if you see from 99 to 2009, military business between the two nations was worth around 9 billion US dollars. And these strategic military relations between the two nations extended to intelligence sharing, which we would understand very clearly with the talk on Pegasus, on terrorist groups and joint military trainings. So Israel has grown stronger, especially in the last 10 years or so. Uh, I would say India, which was a close ally of the Palestinian, has now become an ally of apartheid Israel with security collaborations and ideological symmetry. So the ideological symmetry, I'm talking about the far right regime in Israel and the very far right regime in India. As between India and Israel, he says that the history of the partnership between Israel and India reveals the way in which Israel exported its techniques of oppression to India, ranging from arbitrary detentions and surveillance to restrictions on mobility and extrajudicial killings. I wouldn't go into much details of this. We all know what we are seeing almost on a daily basis here, and also what we see almost on a daily basis, what's happening in Gaza. So, well, so about Pegasus, the next few slides I've shown what it is. I'm sure you have seen. The next slide is on Pegasus. Yeah. More than 150 organizations and people of conscience from across the globe have come together to launch a campaign targeting NSO groups, Pegasus, serving Israel's apartheid and exported to be used against dissenting voices globally. And we all know too well that how the social media is very effectively used for this exercise. The campaign demands an end to all spyware trade. Pegasus investigation has revealed the pervasive extent to which Israeli cyber weapons have been deployed against journalists, rights defenders, opposition leaders, and heads of states across the world. Now, coming to BDS in India, as was mentioned, it is not very active economically for the reasons I've just mentioned now, that the environment is just not conducive, and and that it will not even get support from the big businesses. We know very well. But of course, having said that, I think what is important is to say that there are some small achievements made by uh, the Indian campaign for the actual boycott of Israel in Kagbi, which was formed in 2010. And then, it is co-organized. There is a lot of organizations that networks with the BDS National Committee, of course, Committee of Solidarity with Palestine, All India Peace and Solidarity Organization, where Kisan Sabha is very, very actively involved and supporter of the BDS movement. And our campaign for academic and cultural boycott of Israel in Kagbi, they have done, and I think they have put a number of slides online. I think one of this is in 2010, when tabla master Zakir Hussain was to go to Israel to perform, appealed to him, explained to him what the situation was, and Zakir Hussain cancelled his trip. And there are also a couple of other examples of Bollywood group that were scheduled to go to perform in Israel. And when they were appealed by our friends in Kakbi group, that they said they postponed and they kept postponing for a few times, and eventually the event did not. To say that they do not go and participate in Israel, we have our Professor Achin Vinayak and others, of course, the patrons like Arundhati saying that we have to strengthen on this side of the boycott. So that is going on. And very recently, I got connected, and I must again thank you, your department and faculty, because it made me to find out who are the people active on ground in India and how does the network work. And I got connected with Ms. Apurva Gautam, who is a coordinator for Asia Pacific, because BDS has network in every continent, and Apurva coordinates for Asia Pacific. And she shared some very interesting insights about how difficult to push much in India, although INCAGB is doing its best, but also the experiences in some countries in the region which have completely no relations with Israel, and others that have close ties with Israel. So it's definitely a process that is picking up, I should say, and I only feel it's going to spread across the continents and all the countries. So, coming to Africa, my continent, there is a Pan-African Palestinian Solidarity Network, PAPSON. It was formally established in 2021, and we managed to send one person from Malawi. Small as we are, our group small, being very, very small, we still sent a representative. Um, and the network includes 20 member countries. In Kenya, in South Africa is very active, yes, but we are more connected with Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia. We are more connected, and I'm particularly more in touch with the Kenyan group, Kenyan Palestinian Solidarity Movement. It's doing very good work, regular communication. And why did Malawi do that? I don't know. There is no research done. It's not openly spoken, but there are many rumors. As I mentioned, there were elections just before, and people knew that a president went to Israel, he went to Jerusalem. What happened there? I don't it, but I think the outcome is clear that as I'm talking, there is a Malawi embassy in Jerusalem. So this triggered to form a group in Malawi. When Malawi did this, it sort of raised curiosity and anger in neighboring countries. My friends in Kenya and Palestinian Solidarity Movement straight away messaged, "What's happening in Malawi? Why is Malawi doing this?" And this also prompted the BNC member, Dr. Mantovani, to visit Malawi and to raise awareness. And I'm very glad to say that when Mantovani came in later in 2021, we could arrange for her to meet with cabinet ministers or parliamentarians or social media to raise awareness, because they asked very fundamental question as to why this is wrong. And it's not surprising, because Malawi was under serious censorship because people had no access to information. So even after all these years, they really did not know what was wrong about Malawi doing this. So since then, we are a very small group, and it's rather difficult for us, challenging for us, because a Christian church is very, very strong here, and there are also issues between Christian Muslim, and as I said earlier, it is seen as a Muslim issue, not as a rights issue. So there are small as we are, country is small, but challenges are many and resources are less, but nonetheless we are trying. And as I'm talking, we are looking forward to host the Kenyan Palestinian Solidarity Movement has come up with a very good idea that they have contacted some senior members of the clergy from West Africa, I think Nigeria and Liberia, who will be visiting us in end of October or early November, visiting Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi. And what the idea is to bring this very reputed senior members of the Catholic faith is to speak to the Christian faith leaders in our countries, because the church plays a very important role in our countries. church has played a significant role in the democratization process in Malawi. The voice is very powerful. And we thought if these faith leaders spoke to their fellow faith leaders, it would bring some awareness about the issue. So in Malawi, we are focusing more on this kind of sensitization and awareness that what is the issue of the Palestinian issue and what is the core of the issue and what can we do. And we every year on 29th November, International Day of Solidarity with the people of Palestine, we put up a write-up in the newspaper, on social media. We try to gather somewhere and raise awareness. So these are the things we are doing now, because BDS will not work very much, although we mention, because it's a small market and it's very, very small. I don't think we can get too far with that. But I think this awareness campaign is far more important at this point in time. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. And thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to your comments and questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Patel. It was indeed enlightening for us to hear from you your experiences in Africa and other parts of the world, and the people you have been connecting through your academic journey and later on your research journey as well. Indeed, your presentation was very detailed, where you have mentioned about uh, you know, the wall and its illegality, the impact of the wall on the lives of Palestinian people, the BDS movement legality you have mentioned in detail, and how India and Israel, firstly India's stance on the Palestinian issue. Then we have mentioned about Gandhi's, what Gandhi was basically believer of that position. India and Israel, also in India and Palestine later on. The BDS movement in Africa, you have talked about in length, and particularly you have emphasis also on the contribution, the initiatives the people in Malawi has taken, also yourself and the people you have been connecting with on the BDS movement as well. And you also talked about the future. For me, the takeaway from this the whole talk is where you have emphasis on that it's not a religious right. It's a basic human right
Yes.
which people are have been, away from that. So the Palestinian issue is a basically basic human right issue, and instead
Absolutely.
of focusing very much on the religious right, we should focus emphasis on the basic human right issue. So we will gain uh, more support on that moment as well. Uh, Also, you have mentioned, you have emphasis on that, the brands we are using in our daily lives, a small contribution from our side
Mhm.
will be, we can boycott those from our end, from our side. If we can do that, it's just a small contribution from our side to this BDS, global BDS movement, which is a basic human right movement. You could say, we could talk about BDS human rights. So I like to thank Professor Patel for your time, and now we will take questions from our listeners, from our participants who have joined us from many countries and also from many states of India. Please, I ask my uh, listener, please ask your question or raise your hands one by one, and we will. And the Professor Jawaid Iqbal sir has raised his hand, and he would like to ask you something. Professor Javed sir.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Thank you, Professor Patel, for a very illuminating lecture.
Thank you, sir.
Really enjoyed the part about Malawi's policy towards Israel. It is not only Malawi, many African countries have been moving back and forth vis-a-vis Israel. Recently, we had the example of Sudan. Despite the fact that it's a Muslim majority country, it was moving rapidly towards normalization of relations with Israel. It is only the civil war between the two generals that it has put a break on the Sudanese move. As far as India is concerned, ma'am, we have been witnessing during the last 10 years, particularly the policy of dehyphenating this. We are very adept at using terminology and Palestine. This is a new concept which they have come up with. Basically, it is nothing but taking forward our relationship with the Jewish state. Because if you look at our defense cooperation, uh, that is on the upswing during the last 10 years. Israel has become one of the major partners as far as defense cooperation is concerned. Uh, One major fallout of this has been our relationship with Palestine has stagnated. Time was when India was in the forefront of the Palestine liberation movement. I remember when I was studying in JNU, they had the non-aligned conference and Yasser Arafat hugging Indira Gandhi on the stage. It was such a nice feeling to see these two leaders and look at the position now. So, in the light of changing India's policy, do you think that India's basic justification that we can play a more active role in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? Do you think that really India can play any such role in the years to come in the Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations?
Should I answer the question now or later,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Imtiaz Ahmed?
Yes, ma'am. You can answer the question. We will also take the question later on as well.
Okay, okay. No, thanks for your summary, Imtiaz Ahmed, and also Prof. Iqbal. I can resonate very well. For me, the 1981 non-aligned summit, where Fidel Castro, Yasser Arafat, walking in with so many hundreds of leaders of non-aligned movements, all very vivid recollection of that era. And today, it's sad. What can we say? It's very, very sad what's happening. It's a complete, going on the other side. Can India play a meaningful role in the near future? I'll be very honest. I think truth is bitter. It's likely that this trend will continue for some time, whether we like it or not. But what I want to be reminded of is, much as Professor Chomsky keeps saying that until United States is going to back this, no matter what all the international courts and organizations say, this is not going to change. And for me, that's also disheartening coming from Professor Chomsky, but he's being very realistic and very true, much as he's passionate about the Palestinian cause, as you and me are. But I'm also reminded of Nelson Mandela's quote in his Long Walk to Freedom, where Mandela says that in the late 1970s, when the global support for was growing against apartheid, anti-apartheid movement was picking up, and they would get some information from here and there in their prison cells, he and his colleagues thought that the end was near, that it has picked up such a momentum and apartheid is going to end soon. But apartheid ended only in 1992. He came out of prison only in 1992. And Mandela says that was the darkest phase. And we didn't know the end was close. And that when it happened in 1992, it was like, it has happened. It was jubilation. And the readings from South African says that what really gave them struggle was the sanctions and the support of sanctions and the international solidarity growing. And my optimism is making me think that perhaps this is that darkest hour for the Palestinian people that Mandela was referring to. Maybe another 10 years, maybe another 15 years, we don't know. But the dawn has to come because it cannot get darker than this. Yeah. So my optimism says that movements like BDS, artists coming in, people coming together, a students' union supporting in a big way. One thing I know is such regimes like Israel are extremely nervous when you start boycotting, when you start eliminating, when you start isolating them. Perhaps we are in that phase of apartheid, in this apartheid, as South Africa was at that time. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Professor Patel. Indeed, you have mentioned in detail about that. There is a question from Muhammad Shahnawaz. He has he said that my question is, in the recent time, has the BDS movement in the Gulf region been able to lend support to campaign and movements within the region and calls against Israel as many Gulf states normalizing relation with Israel? I Yes, please.
Thanks for the question. I'll be honest to say I don't know much. I know a little bit more about Africa and what's going on in India because of my new connections. Whether it's working much in the Gulf region, given that the regimes are more, they have changed completely their stand, and they have never been consistent in their stand anyway for the Palestinian cause. How active are the youth movements in the support of BDS movements? I'll be honest to say I don't know, but I promise to come back to this question through Marin Mantovani, or I can link him up with the member of the National Committee, Marin, who can definitely shed more light, or even connect with the coordinator for that region.
Thank you so much, Professor. Please raise your hand and ask your questions, and unmute your mic and raise. You can ask your question one by one. Uh, Anyone? Anyone from? Yes, please ask your question.
Asma Khan.
Unmute your mic, Asma, and ask your question. Do we have anyone asking the questions? If anyone is there, please raise your hand and ask your questions. Please, Asma, please ask your question. You have raised your hand. I guess.
I would also love to hear a female voice.
Yes, please. There was our student. She has worked on that. I guess she was interested in asking question. Asma. Uh, Please ask your questions if anyone would love to ask questions, because India it's a uh, very quality time we got from Professor Patel. Indeed, because of her busy schedule, she is very much busy in her research work and other civil society work. Uh, it's very precious time for us. Please ask your questions, and then we can proceed.
But perhaps, Mr. Imtiaz Ahmad, as others are reflecting and working on their question, yours was, of course, a sum up after I finished my
Yes.
presentation, one on religious rights, and basic human rights, and the other was, of course, the little we can do to boycott Israeli products. Those 2 points you made. I think it's important to understand that religious rights is also one of the human rights, yeah, and that the human rights concept is much broader, and that the right to homeland and right to self-determination, in fact, this is such a, I should say, in this century, if people who are entitled for a homeland are still fighting for a homeland, we should be ashamed as a global community. So what I'm trying to say is the religious groups who take that stand should also realize that those rights are also secured when the broader rights are secured, and take human rights as a holistic concept, that if you don't have a home, how are you going to pray? You need a home, you need a shelter. I think that concept has to be driven through. I just thought I'll make a comment as others are thinking on a question and comment.
Professor Azasa, uh, is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Novara?
Yes,
Yes, please.
is I'm audible?
Yes, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for giving us valuable lecture on insight on the global movement, Palestine rights, on boycott, disinvestment, and sanction. Here I have one question from you. Can you provide insights into the role of NGO and civil society in supporting the BDS related economic actions?
Thanks. I think I mentioned that taking the civil society as abroad, not only NGOs, it differs, of course, in which countries, which organizations are more active. And that's why I gave the example of India to say that much as some of the Indian CSOs and NGOs would like to do more on boycott of Israeli goods. They are not able to do that much because of the political environment. However, if you take the component of cultural academic boycott, the work of Inkagbi, they are really trying logical orientation towards left, and then having developed this solidarity with the Palestinian people that has been there for a long time, and that is continuing. So, if you want, I'll share the link through Imtiaz Ahmed that you can see what Inkagbi has been doing. They are building on that support. So I guess CSOs, but all community that is building this solidarity. But in other countries, like in Kenya, they are taking this boycott quite seriously. And in Kenya, the community is bigger, the support is bigger, and various Muslims groups in Kenya, Kenyans, Africans are also with this group. Unlike that in Malawi, where it varies from country to country. So trade unions are supporting. India farmers groups are supporting very much. So yes, it is there, but I don't think we have a very clear database as yet on which are doing which groups are doing what in which country. But it's a much broader base for various groups to come together and build solidarity. I
Uh,
hope I answered your question.
yes, indeed. Please,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Doctor
Most welcome.
Dr. Asma has asked a question. She has said, as the world witnessed that Israel is continually violating international laws and human rights of the Palestinian and constantly expanding its territories by illegal settlements, in such scenario, is BDS has become only emotional moment which gives a moral support to Palestinian cause, that it really has some relevance in terms to solve the ground issues of Palestine.
Thanks for that question. I think throughout my presentation, I'm trying to say that yes, the atrocity is going on. The wall is ghetto, the new form of that is why it's called politicide and apartheid. The suffering is increasing, and Israel is getting ruthless because the United States is behind and they know political settlement cannot be reached. But I said earlier that I take my very basic beliefs and values from of Gandhi. He says this resistance continuously. You are convinced. You keep going, and the light will come one day. And that was the connection between Gandhi and Mandela. And yes, Mandela lived 27 years, but after that he came out. And as I said, he said the darkest time is just before dawn when he came out of prison. So to me, BDS is going through that phase. In fact, that was supposed to be on my last slide, which I said when I was answering Professor Iqbal, that these global movements may take time. They may lose vigor sometime, but it will pick up again. And eventually, it will face because the guns cannot go on forever, and that the self determination will come, may not be in my lifetime or your lifetime, but it will happen. I'm quite optimistic, and that's what keeps my belief and my activism alive. I think the day I started disbelieving, I will also stop being an activist academic. So I very strongly believe, inspired by Gandhi and Mandela, that this will win eventually. Yes.
Thank you. Indeed, we are hoping that this moment will take its place and we will definitely win. We all win in that right.
We'll see that. You all will, your generation. I'm not sure of mine, but I'm
Hopefully,
optimistic. You all will see that.
hopefully, Professor. Uh, is anyone else? Please raise your hand if anyone is there asking a question. Please. I think we don't have further questions. Or Doctor, yes, Doctor Ziaur Rahman sir wants to ask a question. Please unmute your mic.
Hello,
Hello, sir.
am I
Hello.
audible?
Yes, you
Yes.
are.
Yeah, I have listened to you carefully, and my question is to you: do you think United Nations is playing an active role in preserving the Palestinian rights? Because Israel and United States both are violating the Palestinian rights for many decades. From my own perspective, United Nations is has become an NGO. So it is a most powerful organization, but in the Palestinian context, UN has become an NGO. Do you agree with my opinion?
I fully agree with your opinion, sir. I fully agree. In fact, the very state of creation of Israel was illegal, and at that time, the membership of the UN itself was just about 51 or so, because most of the countries were still colonies, and that Security Council had all the powers, and you always had the scenario where you have Russia absenting and the others, going doing what they want to do. So and that has continued. Nothing much has changed. The only time the decades of hope was when non-aligned countries could raise this, or but then they had no influence on the security council's resolution. So I fully agree with you that United Nations has not been effective at all in this case, as in some other cases. I mean, take the case of genocide in Rwanda. UN could not respond on time, and what happened was genocide. So UN definitely has not been effective, particularly in this case. However, I feel that the role that we, at different times, like the Oslo Accord, recently it is much debated, that the 1993, the role that some groups come forward with the leadership of some of the Scandinavian countries to bring peace. These have at least been some building blocks towards that. Of course, we say 30 years later, situation is worse than ever before. The Oslo has failed, but we need something else to come in that place and push way for negotiation and deliberation, because what is the option? We do not have the guns that Israelis have.